But what is the reason for the Yom Tif? And the Gemara says, because of the Shemin. Now the Rambam says, both. Rambam has two halachas. In one halacha he says the Chanukah is celebrated because of the victory in the war. And in a separate halacha, that the holiday of Chanukah is celebrated because of the miracle of the oil. Now what's a nafkamina? The nafkamina is Su'udas Chanukah. According to the Rambam, who's a Sfardi, and nobody passes like the Rambam, not even the Sfardim, Chanukah, you have to have a Sudas Chanukah, just like Purim. Every day you have to eat a feast. If they eat bread, wine, meat, like Purim. Because if you're celebrating the war is a physical victory. Physical victories are celebrated in physical ways. Physical ways is food. It's like Yom Tif. In addition to light candles, the lighting candles and the saying Hallel and the Anedus Halolu and the Alanisim, this is for the miracle, the Ruchni is the miracle. Now, technically, what's the Ruchni Yizdika miracle? The Ruchni Yizdika miracle technically is that the oil, which should have burned for a day, burned for 8 days, right? But what does it represent? It represents the victory of pure over impure, holy over unholy. It's a spiritual victory. So the Gemara says, Al Eze Nes Kavua, just on the Nes Hanedis. And that's the halacha. We don't have a mitzvah of Sudas Chanukah that Ramah brings, Yesh Laharbis K'tzas B'Seuda. There's no obligation to wash on Chanukah and eat meat and drink wine, like there is on Purim. Because the whole celebration of Chanukah is about finding the jug of oil. The jug of oil represents purity and holiness. And the whole thing is spiritual. So although the miracle was completely supernatural, I ask myself all the time, for oil that's supposed to burn for a day, to burn for 8 days, right? Only God can do that. We all know this, only God can do that, yeah. But for a handful of yeshiva bachrim who've never trained, have never fought, never held a sword, to defeat the strongest army in the world, it's also a pretty big ness. I wonder if you had a ness barometer, and I don't know how you measure these things, what's a bigger ness? What's less likely? That an oil that could burn for a day burns for 8 days, or that a handful of shleppers should defeat the mightiest army in the world? That's exactly what it was. So there is the story of Chanukah and the Yom Tov of Chanukah. They're not contradictory, but they're not the same. The story of Chanukah, we fought a great battle, many great battles. Many people fell, but a handful of tzaddikim defeated one of the most mightiest armies in the world at that time. But the Yom Tov is about the Shemin. Because Chanukah is a spiritual war and a spiritual victory. It was also a physical war and a physical victory, but that's not where the focus lies. That's the pshat in this Gemara. Maya Chanukah says, Rashi Al Eze Nes Kavua. Which Chanukah do we celebrate? Well, let's read it. K'di'isa b'Gemara, the Gemara says, Maya Chanukah, 3 lines out of the paragraph. What does Chanukah quote? K'shenichnesu yevonim lehech. The Syrian Greeks went into the Beis HaMikdash. They made every jug of oil in the Beis HaMikdash. Tommy, I've told this to you a number of times already. They didn't even have to break the seal. Had to just shake them. Because Zav is Matama Beheset. Right, all the Tum is Zav. Right, Mishka v'Moishav. It's a really serious Tum. In this aspect, it's worse than a Tmei Meis. But because they're Tummy Tum Zav, all they have to do is shake those jugs and they become Tummy. So they made every... And by the way, they knew what they were doing. The Syrian Greeks knew they didn't want to destroy the Jews. It wasn't Hitler. They didn't want to kill the Jews. They wanted the Jews to stay alive. They wanted the Jews to join their sphere. What was their sphere? Culture, language, math, philosophy, whatever you could call science in those days. But it was a system, it's called Hellenism, right? Hellenism is a substitute word for what we call today secularism. You want to believe in God? Believe in God. Just don't take it too seriously. It's not that important. Science is important. Culture is important. Theater is important. Music is important. Art is important. Food is important. Entertainment is important. Bathhouses are important. Amphitheaters are important. And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And they wanted to not kill Eden. They wanted to take... You can learn Torah also. You can do mitzvahs. Just don't take it so seriously. So they knew that their enemy was a subtlety. Like that film of lights that I mentioned to you in class. The little animation lights, which was made 40 years ago, is so incredibly good. It's a story about this Misyavni, a Yid who became a Hellenist, and the lights keep chasing him. And he's trying to kill the light, but you can't kill the light. It's like you can't kill the light. He's using a sword to kill the light, and the light doesn't die. He chops it in half, you got two lights. So this is what they were trying to kill. And therefore they knew that the tumah is more important than anything else. They came into the Beis Hamikdash and they defiled. They didn't destroy it. They made it unclean.
How do you clean that up?
We physically took everything out. And the walls don't become tummy. A house doesn't become tummy. Kelim become tummy. You have to tovel them. You have to replace them. Whatever they needed to do. So let's read on. When the house of the Chashmonaim strengthened themselves and defeated them, they defeated the Greeks, the Syrian Greeks. Their interest was to make them forget that the Torah is God's. Torah was a beautiful chachma. Study Torah all you want. Just don't say it's divine. It's scholarly. And take them away from chukei retzanecha. What does the word chukim mean? The idea that mitzvahs are not reasonable. You want to do mitzvahs, fine, but it's a beautiful culture, it's a beautiful tradition, it's beautiful symbols. But chukim, just because God said, that's what they were after. They were trying to uproot kedushas hateidah v'amitzvah. And you said, this is a story that repeated itself 1,000 times. It's repeated itself again and again and again. If you know the history of Lubavitch, the Tzemach Tzedek was ready to pay with his life. Literally. He went to meet the representatives of the Tsar in Russia in 1843, and he took along the final set of pajamas. You know what I'm saying? The set of pajamas that they keep you until Mashiach. He took along Tachlichim. He did not think he's coming back alive. And when his son said to him, "You're frightening our mother," he said, "Good, I want her to be afraid. She should save Tillim for me." She was a daughter of the Mittler Rebbe. So Tzedek used to say, "Ich halt von ihr Tillim." I have a very high opinion of my Rebbe Tzedek Bushka's Tillim. She's the richtige Bas Talmud Chochem. She's the true daughter of the Talmud Chochem. Her father was a Mittler Rebbe. So Tzedek wanted her to be worried. He was under house arrest 22 times. It wasn't a joke. When you read about in Hayayim, there's like 22 times under house arrest. And what was it about? Chinuch. They didn't say stop teaching Jewish children Judaism. They said modernize it. And a lot of the ideas that they gave are, from a perspective of pedagogy, from a perspective of education, good. How do you teach children in a way that they should learn, that they should understand, they should develop themselves? And the Tzemach Tzedek's answer was, we don't teach children only they should be smart. We teach children that they should be pure and holy. It's a whole different method. And it's seriously possible that in order to communicate to children the purity and the holiness, you teach it in a way which is pedagogically less efficient. From a learning angle, it's a chassaron, because it's not about information. It's about information also, but it's about holiness and purity. And the Syrian Greeks were on that line. They created that phenomena of not attacking the Jewish body, not attacking the Jewish people as an entity, trying to rip out the Yiddish neshama. And this has happened again and again and again. And the Gedolei Yisrael have noses, very good noses. They smell when someone's after Yiddish guf and when someone's after Yiddish neshama. And the reactions are very different. When they smell that someone's after Yiddish guf, you say a kapitel Tillim. When they smell that they're after Yiddish neshama, you go to war. I explained this to you last time. When someone attacks the Jewish body, it's God's problem. When someone attacks the Jewish soul, it's our issue. And the Chashmonaim fought on that ground. Chashmonaim didn't fight for their physical well-being, because they were terrible warriors, they had no business fighting. They fought for their spiritual being. And the Eibishter made an unbelievable ness that they won. And the reason the Eibishter made an unbelievable ness, because the Eibishter endorsed, the Eibishter supported their Mesiras Nefesh. The Eibishter said what they're doing is correct, even though it was, for all intents and purposes, a mission of suicide. It's called Kiddush Hashem. What's the difference between Kiddush Hashem and suicide? And the answer, are you doing it for God, or are you doing it for you? If you're doing it for you, it's suicide. Doing it for the Eibishter, it's the biggest mitzvah. If you're doing it for yourself, it's the biggest Aveda, and there's no margin for error. And the Chashmonaim made that judgment. The Sanhedrin took a year, 12 months, to say, yeah, they did it for the right reasons, we're going to make it into a Yom Tov. But that's Chanukah. My Chanukah says Rash al Eze Nes Kavua, and the answer is a Mesiras Nefesh for Kedusha and Tara. Right? Kedel Lakaba is going to explain later. Of course, the end of the story was they found one jug of oil that it's supposed to burn for a day, burned for 8 days, and the Rebbe says in the Kutasichas When the whole community is tameh, you bring karbanas b'tumah. When the whole community is tameh, you bring oil in the Beis Hamikdash, which is tameh. Halachically, there was no problem with lighting the menorah. So the shaila becomes, there's a rule in the Gemara. Hashem doesn't make miracles for nothing. They had oil. The oil was tameh, or possibly tameh. Because we assume that the Syrian Greeks went to the Beis Hamikdash, they found all those shelves full of these jugs, give them one shake, that's it. Hesed, tumah, finished, no good. Halachically was kosher. So the only reason the Eibishter made the nest was not because they had no oil. They had no pure oil. And the Eibishter made the nest to show the Yidden, I agree with what you did. From a perspective of Nigla, there was no need for this nest. Take tameh oil and use it, it's kosher v'yosher. And they did it. But the Eibishter wanted the Yidden to know that the Mesiras Nefesh they had, which wasn't suicide, and because it wasn't suicide, it was Kiddush Hashem, the Eibishter was supporting it, and he showed them his support by making the nest that the oil should burn for 8 days instead of 1 day, and it became the basis for the mitzvah of Chanukah. The oil was in shelves. It's brought in Sfarim. This is an altar shell. It was under the ground. In other words, there was a place, the seal was closed, the seal wasn't broken. But none of the jugs had the seals broken. They didn't have to break the seal and just give it a shake. But this was under the ground where they could not have shaken it. In other words, we assume, had they taken it out of the ground, they wouldn't have put it back in.
How did it get there?
There's a better question. Since when does the Kohen Gadol seal jugs of oil for the menorah? We're learning our Beis Abchira. The Eibishter gave us a reprieve for those who learn Shloisha Prakam Yom Rambam. But Rosh Hashanah we had Ilchas Beis Abchira. For Lubam, it's the easiest part of Rambam to learn because we've learned it so many times. But we started today Klei Hamikdash. Today is, I think today is what Ches. What are we holding now? We did Aleph Beis Gimel Dal Hebel. There's Ches and Aleph Beis Klei Hamikdash. In the Klei Hamikdash, as the halachas how they made the oil, there was a department for that, and there was a department head, and his name is mentioned in the Mishnah. He put his name on the jugs. The whole thing is an anomaly. One day, the Kohen Gadol walked into the department with the Lishka Shashmanim and said, "You're making oil? Yeah, I want to put my ring on one." And he did it. Now, you could say that it was casual. You just did it to be interesting. But it was clearly a hashgacha. And maybe they thought it was special. I don't know. But the Maimorim say, the Mittel Rebbe Chris Barichas Neshariyera, that the Munach B'chisomish Kein Godel represents the Madreg of Yechida. It was sealed differently. So it had a protection. This is spiritual. Practically, it was under the ground. Maybe, I'm making this up now, they put it under the ground because the Kohen Gadol didn't come into the Lishkas Hashmanim and seal jugs. This was an exception. But Chassidus makes a very big deal out of this, that the Kohen Gadol, that particular jug he sealed, because the Kohen Gadol represents the Yechudish B'nefesh. There's no klipa against Yechida, so the Goyim didn't see it. They couldn't touch it. The Raya in Nigla, that the Goy didn't touch it, that it was in the ground instead of in a shelf. And maybe they put it there because it was an unusual thing. The Kohen Gadol did not make his way into the Lishkas Hashmanim to seal jugs of oil. So there's a lot of interplay between the Gemaras and the Chassidus on this question.
The main reason we don't have like a proper meal is because we don't want to take the whole thing is for ruchnius and it's not a physical, like it was like ruchnius over gashmius.
It's a really good question that you're asking. And you can ask the question in two ways. The question as you asked it is one way to ask that question. The second way, why is the Rambam arguing with the Gemara and saying, sit down and eat and drink? So I'm going to make up an answer now. A total concoction. Okay? I think there's credibility to your supposition, although I have no source. The truth of the matter is that the Rambam is right. The Rambam is right. There was an incredible victory in war. That's enough. There was a second nest with Shemin. So the Rambam says celebrate both. The halach is you don't follow the Rambam. And I would agree with you that the reason you don't follow the Rambam is because you don't want to dilute the Yom Tov of Chanukah by something other than the most important part of Chanukah. But let me just finish my thought. The Rebbe brings Nukut Sikh Samoyed in the Kazakh The Rebbe holds, and I'm obsessed with these ideas, the Rebbe holds that the Rambam wrote on Mashiach the Ketera. The Rebbe says in one Sikha that after Mashiach comes, we're going to pass it from the Rambam. Why? Because after Mashiach comes, you can eat and drink, you're not going to forget the Shemin. Meaning, in Golus, where if you do both, you know and I know that the feasting is going to become Yishmak. They're going to create new Chanukah, I don't know what whiskeys, and the idea of the Menei, you light a candle also. It's like you read a Megillah, you read a Megillah, Purim, everybody knows the Purim is the party. So they didn't want for that to be overshadowed. But in a perfect world, in a Mashiach Dika world, you pass it like that Rambam, you do both. Why? Because the feasting is not going to take away from the Ruchnius. So I think that what you just said is very precise. The only one problem, it doesn't say it. At least I don't know a source for that. The bottom line is, this is the halacha. And it's a halacha that Sfadim and Ashkenazim agree on. Chacha feel that Rambam was a Sfadi. And the Rambam, the Beis Yosef was also a Sfadi. The Ramah was an Ashkenazi, right? The Ramah is the one who says, Tevel Habes Tas Besuda, eat a little bit extra on Chanukah. But nobody passes like this Rambam, and perhaps that's the reason. Emphasis on the word perhaps.